Now let's begin. Marcus Powers had learned early in his career as a documentary filmmaker that the truth always revealed itself if you were patient enough to watch. For 15 years, he'd trained his eye to catch the micro-expressions, the subtle shifts in body language, the tells that separated genuine emotion from performance. It was this skill that had won him 2 regional Emmy Awards and a reputation for exposing corruption in places most people never looked. What he'd failed to see was the rot growing in his own home. The realization came slowly, like ice forming on a windshield. Small moments that seemed insignificant in isolation, but together painted a devastating picture. The way his wife Kristen would dismiss their 9-year-old daughter Lily's accomplishments with a wave of her hand. How his mother-in-law Margaret Hayden had moved into their guest house 2 years ago and gradually taken over their lives like invasive kudzu. The whispered conversations that stopped when he entered rooms. Lily's once bright eyes growing dimmer each month. Marcus had met Kristen Hayden 12 years ago at a film festival in Portland. She'd been everything he thought he wanted, poised, educated, from a good family. Margaret had seemed elegant at first, a widow who'd raised her daughter alone after her husband died in a boating accident. Marcus had been so focused on building his career and starting a family that he'd missed the warning signs. The way Margaret criticized every decision Kristen made, then smoothed it over with saccharine affection. How Kristen became a different person around her mother, smaller somehow, desperate for approval she'd never receive. When Lily was born, Marcus had hoped things would change. For a brief window, they had. Kristen had been a devoted mother those first 2 years, and Margaret had kept her distance. But then Kristen's father's estate was finally settled, a bitter legal battle that revealed he'd left everything to a marine conservation charity, cutting Margaret out completely. Margaret had appeared on their doorstep 3 days later with her designer luggage and wounded eyes, and Kristen couldn't say no. The guest house arrangement was supposed to be temporary. That was 26 months ago. Marcus had been on location in Montana for 3 weeks in October, documenting the last of the independent cattle ranchers. When he'd returned, Lily had seemed different, quieter. She flinched when Kristen raised her voice. Her latest school art project, a beautiful watercolor of their garden, was crumpled in the trash. When he'd asked about it, Kristen had said Lily was becoming too big for her britches and needed to learn humility. Margaret had nodded approvingly. Children today are so entitled. We're teaching her proper respect. Marcus had pulled Lily aside, asked if everything was okay. She'd looked at him with those big hazel eyes, his eyes, and said, "I'm fine, Daddy. I just need to try harder." Try harder at what? He'd wanted to ask. But Kristen had called them for dinner, and the moment passed. The weeks leading up to Thanksgiving had been a masterclass in manipulation that Marcus only recognized in hindsight. Margaret had insisted on hosting. In your beautiful home, of course, and invited her sister Geneva Dillon, Geneva's husband Norman Conley, and their 2 adult sons. The Hayden side of the family in full force. Kristen had thrown herself into preparations with manic energy, desperate to create the perfect holiday that would meet Margaret's impossible standards. She'd enlisted Lily to help, which meant the 9-year-old was polishing silver at midnight and arranging flowers before school. When Marcus suggested Lily was too young for such responsibilities, Kristen had snapped at him for the first time in their marriage. "You're never here anyway," she'd said, her voice cold. "You don't know what needs to be done." Marcus had been home for 3 weeks straight. He'd turned down 2 projects to be present, but pointing that out seemed futile against the force of Margaret's influence. Thanksgiving morning arrived with crystalline November sunshine that made their Seattle Craftsman home look like something from a magazine spread. Marcus had risen early to start the turkey, one tradition he'd held onto from his own childhood. His father, dead now 5 years, had taught him the family brine recipe. As Marcus worked in the quiet kitchen, he felt his father's presence, remembered the man's steady hands and steadier wisdom. "Watch people when they think no one's looking," his father had told him once. "That's when you see who they really are." By noon, the house was full. Geneva Dillon had arrived with her customary criticism disguised as concern, examining the table settings and asking if Kristen was sure about her centerpiece choices. Norman Conley, a retired insurance executive with the personality of wet cardboard, had immediately claimed the best recliner and the TV remote. Their sons, Andre and Philip Conley, both in their 30s and unemployed, had raided the beer Marcus had specifically bought for his friend Patrick Dwyer, who was coming later. Margaret held court from the living room sofa like a queen granting audiences, directing Kristen and Lily to fetch her things, adjust the temperature, bring her sparkling water with exactly 3 ice cubes. Kristen complied with the desperate efficiency of someone taking a test they'd already failed twice. Lily moved through it all like a ghost, anticipating needs before they were spoken, making herself small and useful and invisible. Marcus watched from the kitchen doorway, his documentary instincts finally, belatedly, screaming warnings. He pulled out his phone and started recording, not sure why but trusting the impulse. In his line of work, having footage was everything. The afternoon blurred into a performance of family togetherness that felt increasingly surreal. Geneva and Margaret swapped stories about the old days when children knew their place and women didn't have to work outside the home. Norman grunted occasional agreement. Andre and Philip sprawled across furniture like territorial cats, complaining about the woke mob ruining football. Kristen laughed too loud at things that weren't funny. Lily served appetizers with hands that trembled slightly. Marcus tried to catch his wife's eye, to signal that something was wrong, that they needed to talk. But Kristen wouldn't look at him. She was too busy looking at her mother, reading Margaret's expressions for approval, for permission, for proof that she was finally doing something right. Patrick Dwyer arrived at 4 with his wife Meredith O'Neill and their 2 daughters. Patrick was Marcus's oldest friend, a civil rights attorney who'd represented some of Marcus's documentary subjects pro bono. Meredith was a social worker who specialized in family trauma. They brought warmth and laughter and normalcy into the room, and Marcus felt himself breathe easier for the first time all day. Their daughters, both around Lily's age, immediately invited her to play upstairs. Lily looked to Kristen for permission. She needs to help serve, Margaret said before Kristen could respond. The girls can entertain themselves. Marcus opened his mouth to object, but Patrick's hand on his shoulder stopped him. His friend's eyes said, "Wait. Watch." So Marcus watched. He watched as Margaret commanded his daughter like a servant. He watched Kristen enable it, validate it, enforce it. He watched his in-laws treat his child like she was less than human, an appliance to be used and discarded. The moment that would change everything came at 5:47 p.m. Marcus had stepped into the hallway to take a call from his producer about a project starting in December. The conversation lasted maybe 90 seconds. When he returned to the living room, he found a tableau that would be seared into his memory forever. Lily was on her hands and knees in front of the sofa. Margaret had her stocking feet resting on his daughter's back. Geneva's feet were there too. They were laughing, wine glasses in hand, talking about their last spa trip. "She needs to know her place," Margaret said, wiggling her toes against Lily's spine. "Just like Kristen did at this age." "Best thing I ever did for my daughter," Geneva agreed. Broke her of all that independent thinking. Kristen stood in the doorway holding the turkey platter, watching this scene with an expression Marcus couldn't read. Not horror, not concern, something closer to resignation, or maybe relief that the target wasn't her. The room seemed to freeze. Patrick and Meredith sat forward on their chairs, horrified. Norman kept watching football. Andre and Philip smirked like this was the funniest thing they'd seen all day. Marcus felt something crystallize inside him. All those months of doubt and dismissed concerns hardening into absolute clarity. He crossed the room in 3 strides, gently lifted his daughter from her position on the floor, and held her close. She was shaking. He looked directly at his wife, then at Margaret, then at each person in that room who'd witnessed this degradation and done nothing. Then Marcus Powers said 5 words that changed everything. "Pack your things. We're leaving." The silence was absolute. Kristen's fingers went slack. The turkey platter hit the hardwood floor with a crash that sounded like thunder, meat and vegetables scattering across the room. Gravy splattered the white walls, Margaret's designer shoes, the precious Persian rug. "What?" Kristen's voice came out small, disbelieving. "You heard me." Marcus kept his voice level, calm, but something in his tone made Margaret's smile falter. "Lily and I are leaving. You can come with us, or you can stay with your family. Choose now." "You can't." Margaret started to stand. "Sit down." The command in Marcus's voice made her flinch. "You've humiliated my daughter for the last time. Actually, you've done much worse than that, haven't you? I've been blind, but not anymore." He looked at Lily, whose face was buried in his shoulder. Go upstairs and pack your favorite things, sweetheart. We're going to stay somewhere else tonight. Marcus, you're overreacting, Kristen said, but her voice shook. She was just using our daughter as furniture, teaching her that her worth is measured by how small she can make herself, recreating whatever hell your mother put you through. Marcus's eyes were hard. I saw your face, Kristen. You weren't surprised. You weren't even upset. This has been happening for months, hasn't it? While I was working, trying to provide for us, you and your mother were systematically destroying our child. She's being dramatic, Geneva said. Children need discipline. That wasn't discipline. That was abuse. Meredith O'Neill stood up, her professional voice cutting through the chaos. As a licensed social worker, I'm required to report what I witnessed here today. Margaret's face went white. You wouldn't dare. Watch me. Meredith pulled out her phone. Everybody calm down, Norman said, finally paying attention. We can handle this as a family. You're not my family, Marcus said quietly. Patrick, Meredith, can you stay with Lily while I pack? Absolutely. Patrick was already moving toward the stairs. Kristen stood amid the wreckage of the dinner, looking between Marcus and her mother like a rope in a tug-of-war finally about to snap. Marcus, please. Can we talk about this? Is there anything to talk about? Are you going to tell me I didn't see what I saw? That putting our 9-year-old daughter on the floor as a footstool for your mother was normal? That the bruises on her knees she explained away as playground accidents were actually from this? Marcus's voice cracked slightly. How long, Kristen? How long has this been going on? Kristen's silence was his answer. Marcus took Lily upstairs. She was crying now, great heaving sobs that broke his heart. I'm sorry, Daddy. I'm sorry. I tried to be good. You are good. You're perfect. Marcus held her tight, fury and grief warring in his chest. None of this is your fault. None of it. I should have seen it sooner. I should have protected you. Mama said you wouldn't understand. That this is how families work. This is not how families work. Real families don't hurt each other. They don't make children feel small and worthless. Marcus pulled back to look at his daughter. I need you to understand something, Lily. What happened downstairs, what's been happening, that's not love. That's not normal. And it's never going to happen again. They packed quickly. Clothes, books, Lily's stuffed rabbit she'd had since birth. Marcus grabbed documents from his office safe, passports, birth certificates, bank statements. His instincts were screaming that he'd need them. When they came back downstairs, the family was in heated argument. Geneva was berating Kristen for letting Marcus walk all over her. Margaret was on her phone, probably calling her lawyer. Andre and Philip looked like they wanted to physically stop Marcus from leaving, but were too cowardly to try. Kristen stood apart from them, tears streaming down her face, looking lost. Kristen, Marcus said one last time. Come with us. We can work through this, but not here. Not with them. She looked at her mother, then at Marcus, then at Lily, and chose to stay silent. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow, Marcus said, and for full custody. If you want to be part of your daughter's life, you'll need to prove you can put her first. Until then, any communication goes through my lawyer. He picked up their bags, took Lily's hand, and walked out of his own home. Patrick and Meredith followed with their daughters, leaving the Hayden family in the ruins of their perfect Thanksgiving. Marcus drove to a hotel downtown, got a suite with 2 bedrooms, and ordered room service. Lily fell asleep early, exhausted from stress and emotion. Marcus sat in the dimly lit living area, his mind racing, and watched his phone light up with messages. The first few were from Kristen, defensive and angry. Then they shifted, became pleading. By midnight, she'd sent 15 texts, each more desperate than the last. Margaret was texting too, alternating between threats and saccharine appeals to family loyalty. Marcus ignored them all. Instead, he opened his laptop and began reviewing footage. He'd been recording more than he realized, his documentary instincts capturing moments over the past months. Lily flinching from raised voices. Kristen's cold dismissals. Margaret's calculated cruelty disguised as grandmotherly guidance. He had evidence. Now he needed a plan. Marcus had spent 15 years documenting the truth. He'd exposed corrupt politicians, predatory corporations, systemic injustice. He knew how to build a case, how to find the story within the story, how to make people see what they'd been conditioned to ignore. His phone buzzed again. Message 17 from Kristen. He didn't read it. Instead, he pulled up his contact list and started making calls. Patrick Dwyer first, to discuss legal strategy. Then Meredith, to understand the reporting process and what protective services would need. Then his old colleague Ed Moody, an investigative journalist who specialized in family court corruption. By 2 a.m., Marcus had the skeleton of a plan. By 4 a.m., he'd refined it. And by the time dawn broke over Seattle, turning the hotel windows gold, Marcus Powers knew exactly what he was going to do. He was going to dismantle the Hayden family piece by piece. Not with violence or illegal tactics, but with something far more devastating, the truth. He was going to expose every lie, every manipulation, every calculated act of psychological abuse they'd perfected over generations. And he was going to make sure that everyone who'd enabled this, Kristen, Margaret, Geneva, all of them, faced consequences that would follow them for the rest of their lives. His phone buzzed with message 37 from Kristen. Please, Marcus. We can fix this. Don't throw away our family over one misunderstanding. My mother is crying. This is breaking her heart. Just come home and we'll talk. Marcus looked at his sleeping daughter, at the peace on her face for the first time in months, and felt his resolve harden into something unbreakable. He typed one response. Your lawyer will hear from mine tomorrow. Then he blocked every number connected to the Hayden family and got to work. The law offices of Dwyer and Associates occupied the 15th floor of a glass tower in downtown Seattle, with views of Elliott Bay and the Olympic Mountains beyond. Patrick Dwyer had built his practice on reputation. He was known as the lawyer you called when you needed someone who couldn't be intimidated, bought, or broken. Marcus arrived at 9 a.m. sharp on Black Friday with Lily and a thumb drive containing hundreds of hours of footage. Patrick's assistant, a sharp woman named Claudia Cummins, greeted them warmly and settled Lily in a conference room with art supplies and snacks. She seemed to understand without being told that the child needed gentle handling. Meredith sent over her initial report this morning. Patrick said once they were alone in his office. She documented what she witnessed, filed with CPS, and CC'd the police. There's going to be an investigation. Good. Marcus handed over the thumb drive. This is everything I've filmed over the past 6 months. Some of it was intentional documentation for projects, some was just life. But it shows a pattern. Patrick plugged it in and started reviewing. His expression grew darker with each clip. Lily being berated for minor mistakes. Kristen parroting Margaret's cruel assessments of their daughter's worth. The progression from psychological manipulation to physical positioning, making Lily sit on the floor while adults took chairs, stand in corners during family meals to think about her behavior. And finally, the Footstool incident. Jesus Christ, Patrick muttered. This is systematic. And you said Margaret lived with you for 2 years. 26 months. She moved in after being cut out of her late husband's will. Interesting. Give me a second. Patrick made a call, spoke quietly to someone, then hung up. I have a friend who does deep background investigations. If Margaret has a pattern of this behavior, we need to know. People like this rarely start late in life. You think she did this to Kristen? Kristen's response yesterday suggests she's been conditioned to see this as normal. That kind of conditioning takes years. Patrick leaned back in his chair. Marcus, I need to ask, what's your endgame here? Full custody is obvious, but I get the sense you're planning something bigger. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. I'm a documentarian, Patrick. I tell stories that reveal truth. For 15 years, I've exposed people who abuse power. I've never thought to turn that lens on my own life. Now I have, and I've found a story that needs to be told. You want to make a documentary about this? Eventually, maybe. But first, I want to understand the full scope. Who Margaret Hayden really is. What she did to Kristen growing up. Whether there are others, other families, other children. I want to know everything, and then I want to decide how to use that information. Patrick studied his friend. That's a dangerous path. If you're gathering evidence for purposes beyond custody, you need to be careful about how you obtain it and what you do with it. I have no intention of breaking the law. That's not what concerns me. I'm worried about you crossing lines you can't uncross. Revenge has a way of consuming people. This isn't revenge. It's accountability. Marcus met Patrick's eyes. My daughter was used as furniture, Patrick. My wife watched it happen and did nothing. Margaret Hayden has been systematically destroying my family, and I was too blind to see it. Now I see, and I'm going to make sure everyone else does too. Patrick nodded slowly. All right, then we do this right. Legal, documented, airtight. I'll petition for emergency temporary custody today, file for divorce Monday. In the meantime, my investigator will start digging into the Hayden family history. What about Kristen? Will she fight this? Oh, she'll fight. Margaret will make sure of it. But Marcus. Patrick pulled up the footage again, paused on a frame of Lily's face. With this evidence, she won't win. The next hours were a blur of legal paperwork and strategic planning. Marcus signed documents giving Patrick full authority to represent him in divorce and custody proceedings. They discussed living arrangements, school, therapy for Lily. Every practical detail of unwinding a marriage and protecting a child. Around noon, Marcus's phone, he'd unblocked numbers to monitor the situation, exploded with activity. Kristen, Margaret, Geneva, even Norman, all texting and calling. The messages had evolved from pleading to threatening. Margaret, you've made a serious mistake. My lawyers will destroy you. You'll never see your daughter again. Geneva, we have evidence of your neglect. You're never home. You prioritize work over family. Any judge will see that. Kristen, how could you do this? I'm your wife. We took vows. You don't get to just throw that away. Come home so we can talk like adults. And then, at 2 p.m., the message that confirmed everything Marcus suspected. Kristen, my mother says you need to drop this immediately or there will be consequences. She has connections. She can make your career disappear. No one will hire you again. Think about what you're throwing away. Marcus showed the message to Patrick, who smiled grimly. Save all of these. Threats, intimidation, attempts to leverage power against you. It all helps our case. They're panicking, which means they know how bad this looks. They're used to controlling the narrative, Marcus said. Margaret's probably been doing this her whole life, manipulating situations so she's always the victim, always sympathetic. But she's never faced someone who knows how to expose that. His phone rang. Kristen. Marcus let it go to voicemail. She called 6 more times. Should I talk to her? He asked Patrick. Not without me present and recording. If she wants to communicate, it goes through me. That's what lawyers are for. At 3 p.m., Meredith O'Neill arrived with her CPS report and another piece of the puzzle. I made some calls to colleagues who work in school counseling. Lily's teacher has had concerns for months. Notices that Lily stopped participating in class, started apologizing for everything, seemed anxious about going home. But when she reached out to Kristen, she was shut down hard. Margaret, Marcus said. Probably. The teacher said Kristen came to the meeting with an older woman who did most of the talking. They insisted Lily was fine, just sensitive, and that the school was overstepping. More evidence. More proof of a pattern. Patrick's investigator called at 4 p.m. Her name was Sonia Cologne, and she had preliminary findings. Margaret Hayden, named Margaret Morrison, grew up in Connecticut old money. Father was a manufacturing executive, mother from a banking family. She has one sibling, Geneva, and they were both raised in what contemporaries describe as a very cold household. How far back can you go? Marcus asked. I'm just getting started. But here's something interesting. Margaret's late husband, Richard Hayden, died in a boating accident in 2008. Ruled accidental. But there was a significant life insurance policy that paid out. You think it wasn't an accident? I think it's worth looking into. I've also found 3 families in their former neighborhood who stopped speaking to Margaret around the same time. I'm going to track them down, see if they'll talk. Do it, Patrick said. Money is no object. If there's a pattern here, we need to know. After Sonia hung up, Marcus sat in silence, processing. The scope of what he'd uncovered was expanding by the hour. This wasn't just about his family. It was about a legacy of abuse and manipulation spanning decades. His phone buzzed again. A number he didn't recognize. He answered cautiously. Marcus Powers? A woman's voice, older, cautious. Yes. Who is this? My name is Holly Donovan. I was Margaret Hayden's neighbor for 12 years. Meredith O'Neill gave me your number. She said you might want to talk about Margaret and her family. Marcus's heart rate spiked. I do. Very much. Then you should come to my house. There are things you need to see. Things I should have reported years ago, but was too afraid. Not anymore. Holly's voice hardened with resolve. That woman destroyed my best friend. If you're finally standing up to her, I want to help. Marcus looked at Patrick, who nodded. Give me your address. I'll be there in an hour. Holly Donovan lived in a Victorian house in the Queen and neighborhood, all original woodwork and stained glass. She was in her late 60s, with silver hair, and the kind of face that had been beautiful once and remained striking. She welcomed Marcus into a living room full of books and art, offering tea with hands that shook slightly. "I don't know where to start," she said once they were settled. "I've kept this secret for so long." "Start anywhere. I need to understand who Margaret really is." Holly was quiet for a long moment, then rose and retrieved a photo album. "This is Claire. Claire Hayden, Kristen's stepmother. Richard's second wife." Marcus stared at the photos. A warm, lovely woman with Kristen as a teenager, both smiling genuinely. "I didn't know Richard remarried after Margaret." "He didn't. Claire came first. They were married for 8 years before she died. Then Richard married Margaret 18 months later." Holly's voice was bitter. "That's the official story, anyway. What's the real story?" "Claire was my best friend. We met when her family moved in next door, and she and Richard seemed happy. Kristen adored her. Claire was everything a mother should be. Warm, supportive, present. Then Margaret started showing up. She was Richard's business partner's widow, looking for investment advice. At first, it seemed innocent." Holly turned pages, showing progression. Claire's smile becoming strained. Weight loss. Exhaustion. Margaret worked on her systematically. Undermined her confidence. Made her doubt Richard's love. Poisoned their relationship. She'd show up unannounced. Make comments about Claire's housekeeping, her parenting, her appearance. Always phrased as concern. Always with witnesses who thought she was being helpful. Gaslighting, Marcus said quietly. Before that term was common, yes. Claire started having panic attacks. She thought she was going crazy. Richard started pulling away because Margaret convinced him Claire was mentally unstable. By the end, Claire was a shell of herself. How did she die? Pills. Officially ruled an accidental overdose of anxiety medication. But Claire called me the night before. She said Margaret had been in her house again, going through her things, and that Richard didn't believe her. She said she couldn't take it anymore, that Margaret was going to destroy everything. Holly's voice cracked. "I should have gone to her. I should have done something." I found her body the next morning. The room was silent except for the ticking of an antique clock. 3 weeks after the funeral, Margaret was there constantly, helping Richard through his grief. 6 months later, they were engaged. She moved into the house where Claire died, erased every trace of her, and set about molding Kristen into her image. "Did you tell anyone?" "The police?" "Richard?" "I tried." Richard was so deep in Margaret's manipulation he couldn't see it. He thought I was a jealous friend, that I couldn't accept Claire's death. And the police, there was no evidence of foul play. Margaret was clever. She always is. Holly pulled out more documents. After they married, I watched Margaret do to Kristen what she'd done to Claire. Systematic destruction of self-worth. Kristen went from a happy, confident teenager to an anxious, approval-seeking shadow. Richard saw it happening but was powerless to stop it. Margaret had him convinced he was the problem, that his grief made him a bad father. What happened to Richard? Boating accident, 2008. Margaret said he'd been drinking, took the boat out alone despite bad weather, and capsized. His body was found 3 days later. Holly met Marcus's eyes. Richard hadn't had a drink in 10 years. He was terrified of water after a childhood near drowning. And the boat? He'd wanted to sell it for years, but Margaret insisted they keep it. The implications hung in the air like smoke. "You think she killed him?" "I think Richard finally saw who she really was and was going to leave her. I think Margaret made sure that didn't happen. But I have no proof, just suspicions and a lifetime of watching that woman destroy everyone who gets close to her." Holly handed Marcus a thick folder. "This is everything I kept. Photos, journals, documented incidents. I've been waiting for years for someone to stand up to her. When Meredith called and told me what happened to your daughter, I knew it was time." Marcus opened the folder. Inside were newspaper clippings about Richard's death, photos of Claire before and after Margaret entered her life, handwritten notes documenting Margaret's calculated manipulations. It was a treasure trove of evidence painting a picture of a serial emotional abuser who'd left destruction in her wake for decades. "There's more," Holly said. "Geneva, Margaret's sister, she has her own history. 2 marriages ended in suspicious circumstances. Adult children who won't speak to her. There's something deeply wrong with that family. Why didn't you come forward before?" "Fear. Margaret has money, connections, and a gift for making herself look like the victim. She threatened to sue me for defamation after Richard's funeral when I tried to warn people. My lawyer advised me to drop it. I was alone, grieving my friend, and I couldn't fight her. Holly's eyes blazed. But you're not alone. You have resources, documentation, and most importantly, you have your daughter to protect. Margaret made a mistake targeting a child in front of witnesses. For the first time in her life, she's vulnerable. Marcus carefully closed the folder. May I keep this? It's why I saved it. Claire deserves justice, even if it's too late for her. And Kristen, maybe knowing the truth will help her break free. Or maybe it's too late for Kristen too, Marcus said quietly. She chose Margaret over our daughter. Don't give up on her yet. I watched Margaret break that girl over years. It takes time to undo that kind of damage. Holly paused. But your priority has to be Lily. Whatever else happens, protect that child. I will. I promise. As Marcus drove back to the hotel with Holly's folder on the passenger seat, his mind was racing. He had evidence now, not just of Margaret's abuse of his daughter, but of a pattern stretching back decades. Possible murder, definite psychological destruction, a trail of broken people in her wake. The question was what to do with it. His phone rang. Sonia, the investigator. I found two of the families who cut ties with Margaret, she said without preamble. Both are willing to talk, but only off the record initially. They're scared of her. One couple's son was engaged to Margaret's niece before the engagement ended dramatically. The other family had Margaret as a neighbor before she moved in with you. All of them have horror stories. Set up meetings. I want to hear everything. There's something else. I pulled Margaret's financial records. She gave me permission when she tried to hire me last year for an unrelated matter. She's been systematically draining trust funds set up for Kristen and Lily. Money that should have been protected has been moved into accounts Margaret controls. Marcus's grip tightened on the wheel. How much? Close to $3 million. Richard's life insurance, plus family money from both sides. It was supposed to be in irrevocable trusts, but Margaret found ways around that. Your daughter should have a substantial college fund. Instead, it's been financing Margaret's lifestyle. Financial abuse on top of everything else. Marcus felt rage building, cold and focused. Can we prove it? With subpoenas and forensic accounting, absolutely. Patrick will need to move fast though. If Margaret realizes we're looking, she'll start hiding assets. Forward everything to Patrick immediately. I want emergency financial orders as part of the custody filing. On it. Marcus, be careful. When people like Margaret feel cornered, they get dangerous. Marcus thought about Claire's death, Richard's convenient accident, a lifetime of destroyed lives. I know. That's why I'm moving fast. When he returned to the hotel, Lily was asleep and Patrick had news. Emergency custody hearing is Monday morning. Judge Katrina Boyle. She's tough but fair, and she doesn't tolerate child abuse. I've filed for emergency financial restraints too, based on Sonia's findings. What about Kristen? Has she responded? Through her lawyer. She wants to talk, claims this is all a misunderstanding, says she's willing to attend counseling. Patrick's expression was skeptical. I don't buy it. This has Margaret's fingerprints all over it. Play the concerned mother, paint you as overreacting, drag it out in court while she repositions her assets and narrative. So we don't engage. Not until Monday. Let them sweat over the weekend. Let Margaret wonder what we know. Patrick handed Marcus another folder. Preliminary report on Geneva and Norman Conley. Geneva has 2 restraining orders against her from adult children. Norman was investigated for insurance fraud twice, but never charged. Andre Conley has a DUI and a history of domestic violence complaints that were dropped. Philip has a gambling problem and owes money to some unsavory people. Marcus stared at the litany of dysfunction. This entire family is toxic. The Haydens enable each other. They've created a system where abuse is normalized and anyone who objects is ostracized. You married into a cult, Marcus. One with money and lawyers, but a cult nonetheless. And Kristen is still trapped in it. For now, but you've lit a match. Whether she burns with them or escapes is her choice. Marcus looked at his sleeping daughter through the bedroom door. She'd been drawing earlier. Pictures of houses with no doors, people with no mouths. The therapist Patrick recommended would have her work cut out for her. I want to destroy them, Patrick. Not just when custody. I want to expose everything Margaret has done. I want the world to see who these people really are. Then we build an airtight case and we go public when the time is right. But Marcus, you need to be prepared for how this will affect you and Lily. Once you release this story, There's no taking it back. I know. Marcus pulled out his laptop. But some stories need to be told. He spent the rest of the night organizing evidence, building timelines, connecting dots. Holly's documentation of Claire's destruction. Sonia's financial forensics. His own footage of Lily's deterioration. Meredith's professional assessment of systematic abuse. Witness statements from Thanksgiving. By Sunday morning, Marcus had the framework of the most important documentary he'd ever make. Not for awards or recognition, but for justice. His phone showed 43 missed calls and 67 text messages from the Hayden family. The desperation was palpable, shifting between threats and bargaining. Margaret, I've spoken to my lawyers. You don't have a case. Discipline is not abuse. Any judge will see that. Settle this now before you regret it. Kristen, please, Marcus. I love you. I love Lily. I was wrong, okay? I admit it. Just come home and we'll fix this. We can go to therapy, get help, whatever you want. Don't destroy our family over this. Geneva, you self-righteous bastard. Who do you think you are? Our family has been part of this community for generations. You're nobody. We will crush you. The dichotomy between Kristen's pleading and her family's threats told Marcus everything he needed to know. They didn't think they'd done anything wrong. They thought he was the problem. Sunday afternoon, Marcus took Lily to Pike Place Market. She needed normal, needed to see that life could be good again. They bought flowers and fresh pasta, watched the fish throwers, ate donuts. Lily smiled, a real smile, for the first time in months. Daddy, she asked as they walked along the waterfront. Are we going back home? Not to that house. We're going to find a new home, just for us. What about Mama? Marcus knelt down to Lily's eye level. Your mama loves you, sweetheart. But she's sick right now. She's been taught wrong things by Grandma Margaret about how families should work. Maybe someday she'll get better and can be your mama again properly. But until then, my job is to keep you safe. Grandma Margaret was mean. Yes, she was. And you never have to see her again if you don't want to. Lily thought about this. Good. She scared me. She should never have scared you. That's not what grandmas are for. Marcus hugged his daughter. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner, baby girl. I'm sorry I let it go on so long. It's okay, Daddy. You see now. Out of the mouths of children, Marcus thought. Simple forgiveness he didn't deserve, but would spend the rest of his life earning. That night, as Lily slept peacefully, Marcus received a call from an unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Marcus Powers? A man's voice, deep and careful. Yes. Who is this? My name is Andre Emerson. Holly Donovan gave me your number. I was engaged to Margaret Hayden's niece, Taylor Patrick, 5 years ago. A pause. I need to tell you what that family did to me. Marcus grabbed his recording equipment. I'm listening. Taylor was beautiful, smart, seemed perfect. We dated for 2 years before I proposed. Everything was great until Margaret got involved in wedding planning. She took over completely, made demands, criticized every choice Taylor and I made. When I pushed back, things got ugly. What happened? Margaret accused me of abuse. Not to my face. She was too smart for that. She whispered to family members, planted doubts, created scenarios that made me look controlling. Taylor started pulling away, questioning me, believing her aunt's poison. By the time I realized what was happening, it was too late. The engagement ended. Worse, Margaret convinced Taylor I was dangerous. She fabricated evidence of threatening messages, got a restraining order issued against me. My reputation was destroyed. I lost my job. I was a teacher, and the accusations made it impossible. It took 2 years, and every penny I had to clear my name. Jesus, did Taylor ever realize what happened? Eventually, she reached out last year to apologize. Said she'd finally escaped the family and could see clearly. But the damage was done. My career never recovered. Andre's voice was hard. I've been waiting for someone to stand up to Margaret. When Holly said you were building a case, I knew I had to help. Do you have documentation? Evidence of Margaret's manipulations. Court records, messages, everything. I'll send it all. Marcus, be careful. Margaret is vindictive and patient. She'll wait years for the right moment to destroy someone who crosses her. Let her try, Marcus said grimly. This time, she picked the wrong target. After Andre hung up, Marcus added his testimony to the growing file. The pattern was undeniable. Margaret targeted people close to her family, isolated them, destroyed them when they didn't comply. Claire, Richard, Andre, probably others. and now she'd made the fatal mistake of targeting his daughter. Monday morning arrived with rain hammering against the windows, appropriately dramatic. Marcus dressed in his best suit, made sure Lily looked perfect but comfortable, and drove to family court with Patrick. Remember, Patrick said in the parking garage, "Stay calm, speak clearly, and let the evidence do the heavy lifting. Kristen's lawyer is going to paint you as unstable, overreacting, trying to steal a child because of marital problems. Don't take the bait. I've faced down corporate lawyers and corrupt politicians. I can handle this. This is different. This is personal. That's what makes it harder." They entered the courthouse to find Kristen waiting with her attorney, a sharp-dressed man named Josh George who had a reputation for winning ugly custody battles through intimidation. Margaret sat beside Kristen like a general marshaling troops, perfectly coiffed and radiating wounded dignity. Geneva, Norman, Andre, and Philip flanked them, a show of family solidarity. Marcus felt Lily's hand tighten in his. He squeezed back reassuringly and kept walking, not acknowledging the Haydens beyond a cold glance. In the courtroom, Judge Katrina Boyle proved to be everything Patrick promised, a woman in her 50s with intelligent eyes and zero patience for games. She reviewed the emergency custody petition, the evidence, and witness statements with the focus of someone who'd seen every manipulation tactic in existence. "Mr. George," she said to Kristen's lawyer, "your client is alleged to have allowed Holly Donovan spoke about Claire's descent into despair and suspicious death." Andre Emerson detailed his destroyed career and falsified accusations. Two other families who'd lived near Margaret spoke about property disputes resolved through intimidation and manipulation. A former business partner of Richard's revealed that Margaret had systematically poisoned the partnership until the man sold out at a loss just to escape her. The pattern was unmistakable. Margaret identified threats or inconveniences, then destroyed them through legal manipulation, reputation destruction, and psychological warfare. Meanwhile, Kristen's supervised visits with Lily were revealing. At first, Kristen tried to maintain the family narrative, that Marcus was overreacting, that everything would go back to normal soon. But separated from Margaret's influence, cracks began forming. The court-mandated therapist, Dr. Meredith O'Neill, who transitioned from witness to treating professional with court approval, worked with both Kristen and Lily. Her reports showed a mother slowly, painfully waking up to the abuse she'd normalized. Kristen is exhibiting classic signs of long-term psychological conditioning, Dr. O'Neill told Marcus in a private session. She was raised to believe her worth came from her mother's approval. Margaret systematically destroyed her self-concept, then positioned herself as the only source of validation. Breaking that conditioning is a years-long process. Will she break it? She's starting to. Seeing Lily thrive away from that environment is powerful. But Marcus, you need to prepare yourself. Kristen may never fully escape Margaret's influence. Some damage is permanent. Marcus thought about the woman he'd married versus the woman Kristen had become under Margaret's control. If she chooses Margaret over our daughter again, I'm done trying to save her. That's fair. Your priority has to be Lily. Her mother to use the couple's 9-year-old daughter as a footrest. What's your response? Your Honor, that's a gross mischaracterization of what was innocent interaction with a child. The girl was playing, pretending to be a horse as children do. Mr. Powers, who by his own admission is rarely home due to work obligations, walked in without context and overreacted dramatically. Playing. Judge Boyle's skepticism was evident. We have sworn testimony from 2 witnesses, including a licensed social worker, stating the child was crying and that the grandmother and great-aunt made statements about teaching her her place. That doesn't sound like play. Witnesses can misinterpret. I have video evidence, Your Honor, Marcus said quietly, of that incident and others. The courtroom went still. Josh George looked at his client sharply. Kristen went pale. Margaret's composure cracked for just a second. Submit it, Judge Boyle ordered. Patrick uploaded the footage to the court system. The courtroom watched in silence as Lily was positioned as furniture, as laughter and cruel words filled the audio, as Marcus's intervention and the subsequent confrontation unfolded. This is taken out of context, Josh tried weakly. The context appears quite clear to me, Judge Boyle said coldly. She looked at Kristen. Mrs. Powers, you're the child's mother. Why didn't you intervene? Kristen stood, tears streaming. I didn't think. It wasn't supposed to be. Answer the question. Why did you allow your mother to treat your daughter this way? Because that's how I was raised, Kristen whispered. My mother taught me that children need to learn discipline, humility. Through humiliation and degradation? Judge Boyle's voice cut like a knife. Mrs. Powers, I'm ordering a full psychological evaluation for you and your daughter. I'm also granting Mr. Powers temporary full custody, pending further investigation. Your Honor, that's extreme, Josh objected. What's extreme is using a child as furniture. What's extreme is the other evidence submitted here. Financial irregularities, witness testimony of systematic emotional abuse, documentation of a pattern of family dysfunction. Judge Boyle looked at Margaret. Ma'am, you're prohibited from any contact with the child. If you're found within 500 feet of her, you'll be arrested. Margaret stood, quivering with rage. You can't. Bailiff, if she says another word, remove her from my courtroom. Judge Boyle returned her attention to Kristen. Mrs. Powers, you have a choice. You can continue enabling your mother's abuse and lose your daughter, or you can get help, cooperate with the investigation, and demonstrate you can put your child first. Choose wisely. The hearing concluded with clear orders. Marcus had full physical custody, supervised visitation for Kristen pending evaluation, no contact for Margaret, and a full investigation into the family dynamics and financial irregularities. As they left the courtroom, Marcus heard Margaret hissing at Kristen. You fool. You should have fought harder. Now look what you've done. The mask was slipping. The investigation into Margaret Hayden's past became Marcus's obsession over the following weeks. What had started as protecting his daughter evolved into exposing a lifetime of calculated cruelty. Sonia Cologne's forensic accounting revealed Margaret had embezzled $2.8 million from trust funds meant for Kristen and Lily. She'd used forged documents and exploited legal loopholes, moving money through shell companies and offshore accounts. The trail went back years, starting shortly after Richard Hayden's death. She's been planning this for over a decade, Sonia explained in Patrick's office. Richard set up trusts specifically to protect his daughter and future grandchildren from his wife's control. Margaret spent years finding ways around those protections. Can we recover the money? Marcus asked. Most of it, yes. But it'll take time and aggressive legal action. She's hidden it well. Do it. Every penny goes back to Lily's future. Sonia paused. There's more. I found evidence that Margaret may have forged Richard's signature on insurance documents shortly before his death. The policies were changed to make her the sole beneficiary instead of split between her and Kristen. Can you prove it? The insurance company's handwriting expert flagged it at the time, but was overruled by a manager who's since retired. I tracked him down. He's willing to testify that he was pressured to approve the claim. Marcus felt the pieces clicking into place. She killed him. She killed Richard for the insurance money. We can't prove murder without new evidence. But we can prove fraud, which could reopen the death investigation. Patrick leaned forward. If we go down this road, we're not just fighting a custody battle anymore. We're accusing Margaret of murder and fraud. That's a different level of exposure and risk. Holly Donovan thinks Margaret killed her husband and destroyed Claire Hayden, Marcus said. Andre Emerson can testify to systematic reputation destruction. We have documentation of financial crimes. How many more victims do we need before we stop her? I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying be prepared for war. Margaret will fight back with everything she has. Good. Let her. I want the world to see exactly who she is. Over the next month, Marcus conducted interviews with Margaret's victims. He filmed each one with their permission, building a documentary that painted a devastating portrait. Speaking of Lily, the transformation was remarkable. Away from constant criticism and manipulation, she bloomed. Her laughter returned. Her confidence grew. She started talking about the abuse without prompting, processing trauma in the safe space Marcus and Dr. O'Neill created. Grandma Margaret said I was stupid. She told her therapist matter-of-factly. She said I'd never be as good as the other kids because I was weak. Mama agreed with her. And how does that make you feel? Dr. O'Neill asked gently. Angry. Because it's not true. I'm smart. Teacher says I'm one of the best readers in class. And I'm not weak. I survived them. Out of the mouths of children, Marcus thought again. His daughter was braver than he'd given her credit for. In February, Patrick filed civil suits against Margaret for fraud, embezzlement, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The lawsuits were aggressive, detailed, and designed to survive any motion to dismiss. Margaret's response was exactly what Marcus expected: countersuit for defamation, claiming Marcus had fabricated evidence and manipulated vulnerable witnesses. She hired an expensive PR firm to paint herself as a grieving grandmother being victimized by a vindictive son-in-law. But Marcus had something Margaret didn't: the truth and the skill to present it compellingly. He edited his documentary, tentatively titled The Hayden Family Legacy, into a 90-minute film that methodically dismantled Margaret's facade. It opened with Lily's Footstool incident, then expanded backward to show the pattern: Claire's deterioration, Richard's suspicious death, Andre's destroyed career, the embezzled millions, witness after witness describing Margaret's calculated cruelty. The film avoided sensationalism. Marcus let the facts speak, let his subjects tell their stories in their own words, let the evidence build to an unavoidable conclusion. Margaret Hayden was a serial abuser who'd spent decades destroying lives without consequence. He showed the rough cut to Patrick, who watched in silent intensity. When it ended, Patrick was quiet for a long moment. "This is Pulitzer-level work, Marcus. It's devastating, meticulous, and completely defensible from a legal standpoint. You've documented everything, cited sources, given Margaret opportunities to respond that she declined. It's also going to make you a lot of enemies. I don't care about enemies. I care about making sure Margaret can't hurt anyone else. Then you need to be strategic about release. We drop this after the criminal fraud charges are filed, but before the custody trial concludes. That way it can't be seen as prejudicing the court, but it will put maximum pressure on prosecutors and public opinion." Marcus nodded. "When?" 2 weeks. The DA is reviewing Sonia's forensic evidence now. Once they file charges, we release. Those 2 weeks were tense. Margaret escalated her PR campaign, giving interviews to sympathetic media about being wrongly accused by an estranged family member. She painted herself as a devoted grandmother being kept from her beloved granddaughter by false accusations. Geneva and Norman backed her completely, as did Andre and Philip Conley. They formed a united front, claiming the family was being persecuted. But cracks were forming even there. Through Sonia's investigation, Marcus learned that Philip owed Margaret over $200,000 for gambling debts she'd covered. Andre was living in a property Margaret owned, essentially trapped by financial dependence. Geneva's own children wanted nothing to do with their mother, and emails Sonia obtained showed Geneva desperate to stay in Margaret's good graces to maintain access to family money. The Hayden family loyalty wasn't loyalty, it was a hostage situation. And then came the break Marcus had been waiting for. Kristen called him directly, violating the no-contact order outside supervised visits. Marcus recorded the call, as he did all communications now. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice shaking. "About my father's death." Marcus's pulse spiked. "I'm listening. The day he died, he told Margaret he wanted a divorce. I overheard them fighting. He'd found out about money she'd been hiding, and he said he was going to make sure I got everything he'd intended for me." She was furious. "Did you tell anyone this?" "I was 17 and terrified. Mother convinced me I'd misheard, that Daddy was just upset about work stress. Then he died, and she said I'd dishonor his memory by speaking badly of their marriage." Kristen's voice broke. "I buried it. I believed her version. But Marcus, I know what I heard. He said he was leaving her, and 2 days later he was dead. Will you testify to this? If I do, she'll destroy me. You've seen what she does to people who cross her. She's already destroying you, Kristen. She's been destroying you your whole life. The question is whether you're going to let her destroy our daughter too." Silence on the line. "I'm scared," Kristen whispered. "I know, but I can protect you. Patrick can protect you. We have evidence, resources, and the law on our side. But you have to choose. Right now, are you with us or with her?" "I choose Lily. God help me. I choose my daughter." Marcus closed his eyes, feeling a weight lift. "Then we do this together. I'm going to send Patrick to you with immunity papers. You tell him everything, and we'll keep you safe." "Marcus, I'm so sorry. For all of it. I should have protected her. I should have protected you. I was just so broken I couldn't see. Save it for therapy. Right now, focus on doing the right thing." Kristen's testimony changed everything. As Richard's daughter, she'd been present for conversations and incidents others couldn't testify to. She provided timeline, context, and insider knowledge of Margaret's methods. Most crucially, she described finding her father's diary 2 days after his death, a diary that detailed his plan to divorce Margaret and his concerns about her financial manipulations. A diary that had disappeared from the house within days, despite Kristen's attempts to save it. She said it was too painful, that we should let go of reminders, Kristen told Patrick and the police. But I know she destroyed it because it proved he was going to leave her. The police reopened Richard Hayden's death investigation. The DA filed charges against Margaret for insurance fraud and embezzlement. And Marcus prepared to release his documentary. He held a private screening for prosecutors, judges, and key media figures. The 90-minute film laid out Margaret's history in excruciating detail, ending with Kristen's on-camera testimony about her father's planned divorce and suspicious death. When the lights came up, the room was silent. Then the DA, a tough woman named Laura Sullivan, spoke. "We're upgrading charges. This isn't just fraud. This is potential murder, conspiracy, and decades of financial crimes. Mr. Powers, I need all your source material for our case." "It's already organized and ready for you," Marcus said. "Every interview, every document, every piece of evidence. I want justice for every person she's hurt." "You'll get it," DA Sullivan promised. The documentary released online on March 15th. Within 24 hours, it had 3 million views. Within 48, major news networks were covering the story. The Hayden family saga became national news. Margaret's carefully constructed facade shattered under scrutiny. Her PR firm dropped her. Her lawyers, seeing the evidence and realizing they'd been lied to, withdrew from representing her. Friends and supporters melted away as the truth emerged. Geneva tried to maintain the family defense, giving interviews claiming the documentary was fabricated. But when reporters confronted her with court documents and witness testimony, she crumbled. Within a week, Geneva and Norman filed for legal separation from Margaret's affairs, trying to distance themselves. Andre and Philip, terrified of being caught in the legal crossfire, turned state's evidence in exchange for immunity. They provided information about Margaret's shell companies and offshore accounts, helping prosecutors trace every dollar she'd stolen. The Hayden family didn't just fall, it imploded. Kristen moved into a separate apartment, attended intensive therapy, and began the long process of rebuilding herself. Her supervised visits with Lily expanded to unsupervised weekends as she demonstrated genuine progress and commitment to her daughter's well-being. "I'll never forgive myself for what I let happen," Kristen told Marcus during a co-parenting meeting. "But I'm going to spend the rest of my life making it right." "That's all I can ask," Marcus said. He meant it. Kristen was a victim too, even if her victimhood didn't excuse her actions. What mattered now was that she'd chosen their daughter over her mother. The criminal trial began in May. Margaret Hayden, 63 years old and facing multiple felony counts, sat in court each day radiating cold fury. She maintained her innocence, claimed she was being persecuted, insisted the evidence was fabricated. But the evidence was overwhelming. Forensic accounting showed exactly how she'd stolen millions. Handwriting experts testified about forged signatures. Witnesses described systematic abuse. The insurance investigator explained how he'd been pressured to approve suspicious claims. And then the prosecution played excerpts from Marcus's documentary, showing Margaret in her own words and actions over the years. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. They found her guilty on all counts: fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, and insurance fraud. The murder charge related to Richard's death couldn't be proven beyond reasonable doubt. Too much time had passed, too much evidence lost. But the judge allowed victim impact statements about Claire's death and the pattern of destruction. Holly Donovan spoke about losing her best friend. Andre Emerson described his ruined career. Kristen, shaking but resolute, testified about years of psychological abuse and her father's planned escape from Margaret's control. Lily didn't testify. Marcus and Dr. O'Neill agreed she'd been through enough, but Marcus read a statement on her behalf. "My daughter was 9 years old when she was used as furniture. She was taught by her grandmother that her worth was measured by how small and obedient she could be. She spent months believing she was stupid, worthless, and deserving of cruelty. Today, at 10 years old, she's learning that none of that was true. She's learning that she's smart, valuable, and loved. But she'll carry scars from what was done to her for the rest of her life." My daughter wants you to know that what happened to her wasn't discipline or family tradition, it was abuse. And she hopes that by holding her grandmother accountable, no other child will have to go through what she did. When Marcus finished reading, there wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. Judge Boyle sentenced Margaret Hayden to 15 years in federal prison for fraud and embezzlement, with additional state charges pending. Asset forfeiture orders returned the stolen money to Kristen and Lily's trusts. Civil judgments awarded damages to Andre and other victims. Margaret showed no remorse. As she was led away in handcuffs, she looked directly at Marcus with pure hatred. He met her gaze without flinching and thought, "You lose." Epilogue came 6 months later. Marcus had moved to a new house in the suburbs, modern, full of light, with a garden Lily helped plant. Kristen had her own place nearby, and saw Lily 3 times a week, building a relationship that was healthier than anything they'd had before. The documentary won awards and led to policy changes in how family courts handle parental alienation and psychological abuse. Marcus received offers for new projects, but he was selective now, prioritizing time with Lily above career achievements. Geneva and Norman divorced, each trying to rebuild reputations destroyed by association with Margaret. Their sons disappeared from public view, their own legal troubles keeping them occupied. Holly Donovan died peacefully in her sleep in July, finally at rest knowing Claire's story had been told. And Lily? Lily thrived. She joined theater, made friends, excelled in school. She saw Dr. O'Neill monthly, processing trauma at her own pace. Some days were harder than others, but the trajectory was unmistakably upward. One Saturday in September, almost a year after that fateful Thanksgiving, Marcus and Lily were in their garden harvesting tomatoes. The late summer sun was golden, and Lily was laughing at a story about her friend's birthday party. "Daddy," she said suddenly. "Thank you." "For what, sweetheart?" "For seeing. For making it stop. For keeping me safe." She hugged him, dirt-stained hands and all. "You're the best daddy in the world." Marcus held his daughter close, feeling tears prick his eyes. "You're the best daughter. And I will always, always protect you." "I know," Lily said simply. "That's what daddies do." In the end, that was the only revenge Marcus needed. Not Margaret's imprisonment or the Hayden family's destruction, though both brought satisfaction. The real victory was his daughter's healing, her trust restored, her future unshackled from the cycle of abuse that had nearly claimed her. Margaret Hayden had spent decades perfecting the art of psychological destruction. She'd broken Claire, controlled Kristen, and come terrifyingly close to crushing Lily. But she'd made one fatal mistake. She'd underestimated a father's love and a documentarian's skill at revealing truth. Marcus Powers had walked into his living room on Thanksgiving and seen his daughter being used as furniture. He'd said 5 words, "Pack your things. We're leaving," and changed everything. A year later, those 5 words still echoed. They'd freed his daughter, exposed a predator, and served justice to the victims Margaret had spent a lifetime creating. Sometimes the most powerful documentaries weren't about distant injustices or institutional corruption. Sometimes they were about protecting the people you loved and ensuring the truth was told, no matter the cost. Marcus had told that truth. And in doing so, he'd saved not just his daughter, but himself. The garden grew. The scars healed. Life, finally, was good. And somewhere in a federal prison, Margaret Hayden sat in a cell, stripped of money, power, and the ability to hurt anyone ever again. Justice, Marcus thought, tasted sweet. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.